is to carry on the series of my favourite TV programmes. I've missed a few weeks because I've been wanting to, but I'm going to give you 3 programmes I like. So I've mentioned about Ally McBeal, I've mentioned about Oz, and I mentioned about, I can't remember the other series now, oh, The Sopranos, that's it. So the 4th series is another HBO series which I think was very important, which started in the late 90s and went into the early 2000s. So this series is called Sex and the City. So Sex and the City was created by Darrenstar for HBO and is an adaptation of Candacebushnell's newspaper column and 1996 book anthology of the same name. Series premiered in the United States in 1998 and concluded on 2004. Broadcast over 6 seasons, and as of now, in the last 2 years, they have come up with the sequel, which is called And Just Like That. Slightly different, and I'm going to mention my problematic with that programme, because there's some bits of it I like and some bits I just don't. But anyway, so Sex and the City did very well. It came up with some really interesting ideas. So the idea is it's set in New York. The series follows the lives of 4 professional women, 3 in their mid-30s and 1 in her 40s. The one in her 40s, which is my favourite character, is called Samantha Jones. I'm going to talk about her in a minute because she is missing from the And Just Like That series, in my opinion. So, despite the different natures and ever-changing personalities, sex lives, they remain inseparable and confide in each other. So this idea of this womanhood and grouping together and the multiple continuing storylines that intertwine, tackling relevant and social issues of the time, such as sexuality, safe sex, promiscuity and femininity, while exploring the difference between friendships and romantic relationships. The protagonist of the show is called Carrie Bradshaw, which is obviously the idea of Candacebushnell. They just changed the name. She narrates the series, and it's mainly based from her perspective. And it's also because she's a writer, it's the way of analysing her social life from sex relationships through the different diverse individual views. So with this, the alter ego of Carrie Bradshaw is all these different things happen within the show, different relationships, some of them split up. There's also this theme of her always wanting the one, which ends up being Mr. Big. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but that's who it is. But however, all these different things work really well. So when we look at Carrie, she is always in with this businessman. She wants the high life, doesn't really want children, and she kind of works between this writing and have this fabulous life in fashion, lives in the Upper East Side, and she's obviously friends with the LGBT community. A gay talent artist called Stanford Balach, outside of the 3 women, is her best friend. Again, there's always different things. There's always this thing that she goes out with different people. She goes out with a guy called Aidan in the 3rd season, and all these different things about how she wants to deal with this stuff. So Carrie is also sees her friends get married and see the breakdowns of their relationships, which also makes her very negative to whether she finds the right person. So in the end, with Carrie, she's always narrating the show. She's always pushing the show along. She's like, because she's the protagonist, but she also is the momentum of the show. Charlotteyork, who's the 2nd character I want to recommend, and I think Kristindavis is really good, is she comes from a very conventional, privileged upbringing and works in an art gallery. She's always been an A student, overachiever and perfectionist, but during this she's also been very popular and so forth, but she's also optimistic, hopelessly romantic, and a believer in true love and soulmates, which is an absolute antithesis of Samantha, who doesn't believe in soulmates, romance or anything. She just believes that, like, she actually in some ways acts like a man. Basically Samantha does. Anyway, so Charlotte is always searching for this knight in shining armour, believes in the idea of a mahogany boyfriend with a view to marriage, typically dates men of pedigree, status and money, such as bankers, doctors, lawyers, and so forth. So in the end, she does do some things which are kind of unorthodox, which is quite funny, but Charlotte in the show actually gets married to someone who's but in the end it turns out because she doesn't have sex before marriage, this person actually can't have sex with her, so it ends up the marriage becomes unhappy, and then she divorces that person, a guy called Trey, and then just Charlotte, because Trey doesn't want a family, so it ends up it doesn't work, and then with that, Charlotte meets another guy called Harry, and Harry's great because Evan Handler, who plays him, is brilliant. Harry's also in Californication with David Duchovny as his agent, and he's very funny in that as well, just, completely different. So Harry is the opposite of Trey, who was dashing good looking. He's short, bald, hairy, uncouth but funny, passionate and attentive. In fact, some respects, Harry is not the ideal Charlotte wanted. So it also shows that sometimes, good things come in unusual packages. So that's the description of Charlotte. Then we have probably the career-minded lawyer with cynical views on relationships and men is Miranda Hobbes, Cynthianixon. Harvard graduate, did very well, confident and a voice of reason, very highly strung, but ends up in a relationship with a bartender called Steve, who again is very down to earth. But there's also this issue with Steve because he's only a bartender. He feels uncomfortable with Miranda's success and money. So there's this kind of, this juxtaposed position all the time. And again, Miranda's always breaking up with Steve and then comes back to, and then obviously near the end of the first Sex and the City ideal, she then has a child with him and so forth. And then I'm going to come to my favourite character, is Samantha Jones. Samantha Jones is the oldest, most sexually confident of the foursome, independent businesswoman with career in PR, confident and extremely outspoken, and will try, and one of her favourite sayings is she's a trisexual, meaning she'll try anything once. Samantha says at the beginning she's given up on relationships, decided to have sex like a man without emotions or feelings and purely for physical gratification. And I think the character of Samantha is, I think with a lot of relationships, when people were watching Sex and the City, the female in a relationship or the feminine person would be watching all the clothes and all the glamour and all the stuff, and Samantha was kind of like the masculine energy, and I think that's what drew a lot of people like myself in, because though I can like the feminine energy of dressing up and so forth and being, liking the idea of exuberance, Samantha just brings that down. I think, and this is what I believe Samantha is missing from And Just Like That, because without Samantha's character of her being very bleak and showing kind of the realistic way of the world, the kind of cutthroat, and remember this is all set in New York, so she's got this very much the realism, which is always in the thread of the back of Carrie's daydreaming and Charlotte's idealism and Miranda's highly strung behaviour. Actually in the final season, Samantha actually ends up dating a waiter who is struggling actor, and then they get on very well sexually, but Samantha then is actually ill, and through that, because she's ill, this person actually looks after her and really takes care of her and supports her, and it's then what you see is this thing of Samantha then changing because she falls in love with this guy outside of the sexual side. And I think in the first original Sex and the City series, I feel Samantha's arc is really interesting because she is the one who ends up being with someone and actually has the right relationship where there's no demands, there's no thing. So even if like the guy leaves or she leaves, it doesn't matter, but it's still, there's a strength there. And unfortunately she does break up with him, but she misses having that and so forth, which is a shame, because I think she would have been a good relationship with him, but that's just how she is. So though she loves him, she's made the relationship and career first priority ahead of herself, and this is because the guy goes to Los Angeles to become an actor. So Samantha to me is one of the interesting characters because she is also the probably most unselfish in the end outside of all the characters. When we look at all the other characters, like with big shout out to Mr. Big, who carries on and off boyfriend and then becomes a husband. Some of the other characters are really good because they just bring some interesting ideas of giving some dynamics difference out of that kind of the gaggle of the girls. And then obviously we know that Sex and the City became the films, which I'll be honest with you, I saw the first one and I wasn't keen on. I thought it really it lacked like the series. I think the series had some depth to it, and I thought the film was a bit a bit superficial. The second one is just atrocious. I don't know if they did a third one. I don't know. After the second one, I couldn't be bothered. And Just Like That, which is the next load of things, is because Sex and the City had a lot of issues with, there wasn't enough representation of LGBT, which there was, but men only, not so much the women's side. And then obviously there wasn't any ethnic characters. There was no black characters, no Indian characters, nothing like that. And obviously New York's quite a cosmopolitan place. But then again, New York also, for the success, what is very wrapped around who you know and where your background is and where you went to school and so forth. It's kind of a bit group mentality, really. And Just Like That, I have watched both seasons, and my jury's a bit out on it. I feel that it doesn't have the glue of the original series. I do actually like some of the new characters. Nicole Ari Parker, who plays one of the characters, I think she's great in it. But I just find a lot of it, it's more tick boxing, and I don't think it really addresses the group of the girls. The girls seem to be more individual and singular. Maybe also because they're older as well, it doesn't sort of feel as relevant. But I do think the one thing what is missing out of and Just Like That is Samantha, because Samantha was the person who I think would have been, when they're going through bad situations, she's the direct one and hits the honesty button. Whereas I think some of them they've become into these big ruts. Actually, Miranda is the one who breaks that rut, because she comes out that she realises that she's not just straight and she's bisexual and so forth. And actually, I think that's probably one of the good things about Just Like That. Miranda comes out into be actually probably the most interesting and unusual character, whereas the others kind of become a bit more plaintive. And I feel that's the only bad thing about Sex and the City, is the legacy has been spoiled by a series which I just think is lacking. And I really just wish that the others could have got on with kimcattrall and made that work. Because I think with her, she just would have made it more interesting. Even maybe taking sex out of the city and they all move to another city or something like that. I think it just would have been more interesting. So yeah, that's my view. Sex and the City, great show. The original show, excellent. And Just Like That, the films, I'm not that big on. I think they're a big disappointment, a letdown from the original. However, to understand the idea of professional women and the idea of the 90s, to understand the 90s, late 90s and the early 2000s, and also it can teach men a lot of lessons about what women are really after and how they think and what they're after. Because there's a lot of these shows give advice to men about relationships and it's really poor. And I think Sex and the City is probably one of the first times where you watch a show and you go, okay, this is what women want, professional women. They want these different things. And I suppose for some people that could be seen as disappointing, but there's always a silver lining